Hello everyone, welcome in. Happy Sunday. I hope you all are having a good day. It's good to be here on the It Gets Better channel again. Welcome in Elise, thank you for being here, and Rad, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy your cozy knitting and lurking time. That sounds literally amazing. I love a good little crafting session alongside whatever streams I'm watching. Fully relatable content. But yeah, if any of you are new to me, if you've never attended any of my streams before on the It Gets Better channel, my name is B. I use they them pronouns. I am a queer and disabled variety streamer over on my own page, twitch.tv/queerlybee. And I have the honor and privilege of being an It Gets Better ambassador for the 6 months period again this time. I had been last session as well, and last session was my first session, so I was learning a lot about what I wanted to do over on the channel, and so I chose to do like a lot of cozy, oh no, hold on, the captions are going behind my face, which I know I have like a cute face or whatever, but I do want the captions to go over my face when they need to. Or over this, at least the side where like the door is and stuff, so that should be fixed. But last time I did like a lot of like chatting about my own personal stories, specifically while I was like gaming, and this time I really wanted to shift to use this space to talk about issues that are really important to me and that like sit really heavy on my heart in, you know, in a good and bad way kind of thing. In order to like have space to, you know, explore those things that I don't really necessarily always have time to process in my day-to-day life, and to bring on wonderful guests to talk about their personal lived experiences as well. Commander Range, thank you for the follow, friend. Welcome in. And so, you know, I set up this schedule where I'm doing like 45-minute presentation on a subject, and then we'll bring guests in on a little panel session, and we're going to talk to them about their experiences, because I'm just one human, right? We're all just one human, each of us, and we have shared experiences, but everybody has like their own lived experiences as well. So I really like the opportunity to bring people on the page and highlight their unique stories as well. So that's kind of what we're doing with our 6 sessions. We did one already where we talked about being a queer professional and what it's like being potentially openly queer in a professional working space. And so today we're going to be talking about disability and queerness and that like overlapping intersection. So I'm sure a lot of you will be able to relate to a lot of things I'll be able to say if you are a disabled and queer person yourself. Hi Toast, welcome in. It's a Beth, boogie woogie woogie. It's me. Hello, hi. All I can think of is it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Kind of vibes. But yes, so that's what we'll be chatting a little bit about today. But otherwise, I hope you all are doing good. Feel free to tell me how your weekend's going in chat if you want to, if you feel comfortable. We're having a good weekend here with my partner. Just a kind of cozy, mostly inside weekend. We got a little snow on Friday. It didn't really last, but we did get a little snow on Friday, and then Saturday we went out to have Olive Garden, which was really nice. Otherwise, we've just been doing a lot of apartment hunting things and house hunting things, which if you're a part of my community, you know has been a journey, TM. Especially this morning, we got a message from my partner's mom, and she was like, oh, we are gonna go visit this house, we really like it, and if we think it's good in person too, we're gonna put an offer on it. We were like, ma'am, what house? You cannot be putting offers in on houses that we are going to have to live in without our consent. So that was a bit chaotic to wake up to this morning, but it is actually a nice place. So thankfully we won't have to have a chat of like, no, please don't do that. But it was a little bit stressful, so it's been chaotic, but it's been good. And I hope that, if your weekend has been chaotic in any way, that it hasn't been like a bad chaotic. But um, for both of you, wait, what do you mean? Toasty and I will be moving into the house together, yes. But it was weird because their mom was like, oh no, just for me and Toast. It's for us. We're gonna live in it. It's gonna be renovated for us, which is really nice, but they're the ones buying it. So obviously they have like a say in what we pick or whatever, but not like that much of a say where they can just go putting in offers on houses that we might not like, kind of thing, if that makes sense. We'll essentially be renting from them, so we'll be able to get like something at our price that's obviously way nicer than what we could normally get at our price, which is very handy. But it's all been a little bit messy because the relationship between, like, doing financial business things with family is always it's always a little bit spicy. Yeah, a little bit spicy. All right, I am going to jump us into our presentation for today, just because we have a lot to get through in only 35 minutes before we have our guests come on. So, but if you all have any questions or anything during the presentation that you want to share, your own personal experiences, please feel free to do so. Also, I will be talking about the pandemic in this presentation, so I understand fully if for some people, for very valid reasons, that's a very difficult subject. So please take care of yourself throughout the presentation. If you need to step away, if you need to take a break or anything like that, that's totally understandable. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way, like a little CW before we get started. So, how I already kind of introduced myself, so you know who I am. But if you do want to follow me on social media, I am at queerlybee on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else that you find social media. And yes, a little bit of background research, because I do consider myself a little bit of a nerd about these things. I do enjoy the process of research and have really had fun making these presentations for you all, so I hope you all enjoy them as well. But getting us started here, this quote reads, "Combined specifically to me, it, i.e., queer crip, means this political embodiment of both disability and sexuality and gender. It's this space of owning and recognizing class politics, racial politics, disability justice politics, and that all of these things are contained in that identity space." So, this is really just kind of talking about this language that has developed within the queer disabled community. There's a lot of different words you might find people using. Oh, wait, my captions aren't going on this screen. Give me 1 second. I do want to fix that. I don't want them to go over here. Probably up here would be best. We'll see if that works. So yeah, there's a lot of different words that people might use to talk about this intersection of how their disability relates to their queerness and their gender expression or their sexuality expression. So you see here some examples are like crip gay, audi gender, crip queer, etc. Um, and yeah, so that's what the overlapping they're talking about in that quote. The inspiration for wanting to talk about this today was obviously partially my own personal lived experience as both a disabled and a queer person, and how those two things overlap. But I also found this really interesting TikTok a while back. It was like back in December, from a creator named Cooper, um, who actually got their TikTok. Their TikTok was mass reported and taken down from having this conversation. So it definitely brings up some really contrary opinions, unfortunately. So I do know that this is a little bit spicy, but basically they um said, "You're gay, sure, you're gay. That's not the same as queer, though. Queerness is supposed to be radical." And so what they were trying to basically discuss is this idea that queer politics are inherently tied to disability politics, and not wearing a mask and not protecting the disabled community through the pandemic is very problematic and not really in alignment with queer politic. Thank you for the hydration check, C. I hope you're doing well. So it was very interesting to see that conversation happen in the importance of understanding that disability justice is part of a queer politic. Hi Puffs, welcome in. Hi everybody. Hi Eva, welcome in. I hope you all are doing good. It's good to have you here. So, related to this quote says, or this bullet says, like, disabled folks finding their space in the queer community has always been challenging. This isn't a new thing related specifically to the pandemic, and that can be for a number of reasons. One being there's a lot of dehumanization and desexualization of disabled folks, not seen as being sexually desirable or having sexual desires, for a number of reasons, which is very contrary to the queer experience, which can sometimes be overly sexualized, I guess you could say. Um, and then there are like stereotypes about beauty and vanity and expression and passing that still come to play even in the queer community, where we say we're really trying to break down those same stereotypes. There is still a lot of expectations about what you look like depending on what identity label you have and things like that. And a lot of times disabled folks aren't really we don't really have the the privilege of passing, or the privilege of accessing gender affirming care, or safe sexual health care and things like that. A lot of disabled folks are limited in terms of what health care we have access to, or like what insurance we have access to, and a lot of times that insurance won't cover those types of care. So recognizing all of that and how that impacts specifically the queer disabled community, and why we may not be fully accepted as to who we are within our own queer community. And it's kind of this thing that we experience whenever we're multi marginalized. This could be applied to a lot of different things, which is that you can be in a disability friendly space, but it may not be queer friendly, or you can be in a queer friendly space and it may not be disability friendly and or accessible. So then it's like, where do I fit in? Where can I find my space where all parts of me will be honored and welcomed? Can be a challenge that the queer disabled community faces. I know I have myself experienced some of those things that I've described, getting a lot of negative commentary on not like medically transitioning, but then not having access to things like insurance to be able to do so. It's a very like a lose-lose situation you find yourself in. Um, and then there was this really interesting idea that queerness and disability overlap in a unique way when it comes to fear. When it comes to people being hostile towards our communities, which, there are people who are hostile towards all marginalized communities. But queerness and disability overlap specifically in the ways that people are hostile towards us. And it's because that we represent to them, to queerphobic, to ableist people, what a fear of what could happen to them. Whereas for a lot of other marginalized communities, it's more of the fear of the other, fear of someone else. But in our instance, it's more like they're afraid to fully recognize the fact that anybody can become disabled at any point. And that's obviously increasingly true with the pandemic. Long COVID. We'll talk about long COVID in a little bit, but they don't really want to reckon with that. They don't really want to have to like personally consider that that's an potential that could happen to them. And the same thing can be true for queerness, in that People don't want to fully recognize maybe that there is more flexibility to um, their own sense of expression, and that's not even necessarily related to a specific gender identity. I'm not saying that they would necessarily identify as trans or as non binary, but just a freedom of more personal self expression that isn't limited to the gender binary that we see in place, because these ideas of these normative ideas we have for gender and sexuality, they don't just negatively affect queer people, they also negatively affect cishet people. But do they want to reckon with that? Probably not. Probably not. And these kinds of forms of hostility can definitely force people back into the closet, literally for queer folks. And it can also affect disabled people, similarly, rendering us to feel very invisible. And that can look like literal invisibility, or putting someone back into the closet from a disability perspective can look at like something like the horrors of like institutionalization and literally putting people away where they aren't seen. Or it can be more subtle in like doctors not acknowledging health conditions or um, symptoms that we're having, and or people kind of being like, oh, like you don't look disabled, so you must be faking, or that you must not actually be sick because you don't have like an obvious bodily difference that I can point out and understand from just looking at you with no other information. So these are ways that we see that the queer and disabled community are very overlapping in the hostility that we face, and why. And now the meat and potatoes of what I really wanted to get into today was the ways that disability and queerness overlap in the pandemic, and what that experience has been like for myself and for other queer disabled people. So this quote says, "We thought the pandemic would bring people together and make them realize that we're all connected, but we're seeing people being further marginalized, excluded, and made more vulnerable." And I was doing research on this topic, and I brought up a really interesting case study. Let me take a little sip because I'm talking fast because I want to share a lot of things with you all today. Um, and the case study was the Creating Change conference. I've actually attended the Creating Change conference. I should have put a photo of baby gay B here, from when I was at the conference. And that was pre-pandemic when I was in university. If you don't know, the Creating Change conference is one of the largest LGBTQ queer centered conferences in the US that happens annually. There's a bunch of sessions you can attend of speakers and things like that. It's like a multi-day conference. It's a really cool experience when I was able to go pre-pandemic. And during the pandemic, or up until 2023, so 2020 to 2023, I believe they like canceled it or then started shifting to online options for the conference attendance. However, as we know, as disabled people know, the CDC and local public health guidelines are like no longer advising people to mask up, no longer requiring vaccines and things like that. So there's not really any external force requiring people to create accessibility for those of us who are high risk or immunocompromised anymore. We don't have those things to lean on in order to do our advocacy for those things to be included. And it was announced that the 2023 Creating Change conference would not require any masks, no, would not require testing, and would not require proof of vaccination because they cited local health guidelines say that they didn't need to. So that's not great, obviously, and disability activists push back, trying to gain access to these resources for our immunocompromised and disabled queer community members. But the LGBTQ task force unfortunately dismissed their concerns. basically not caring that immunocompromised, disabled, and other high-risk folks will now no longer be able to access the information that the conference provides, the important queer community access that the conference provides. And this quote I thought was really impactful. It is scary, at least it is. It is. We'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but I've had my own big feelings about like TwitchCon and wanting to access conferences for like career development as a disabled person, and there's like no safety guidelines anymore. So it's like we either stay home and don't have access to these things that could really give us means to what we need, or we go and we have to risk our lives and the lives of other disabled folks. So it's a really rough time to be in. One of the articles described it as a pandemic limbo, which I have on another page, but I'll describe as basically like the world is moving on, but we're still very much in a pandemic, but we're treating it like it's not a pandemic, and what that kind of like does for disabled people who still have to go through the world as if the pandemic is still happening, because it is. And like what a tough position that is to be in. So yeah. This quote says, instead of implementing lessons learned about access and inclusion over the past years, because over the past few years a lot of people have learned about how to be inclusive towards high-risk people because they had to, it says, instead of implementing lessons learned about access and inclusion over the past few years, many queer spaces, even activist-oriented ones, ignore the realities of the ongoing pandemic and let high-risk groups suffer the consequences. And so this is where that initial conversation about like a queer politic comes in, right? Because if you were actually upholding a queer politic and you were actually being an activist or you were actually being an ally, then you wouldn't just leave your disabled comrades like out of your planning for your event. I'm sure everybody in that space is LGBTQ, but are they upholding a queer politic? Clearly not. I have multiple chronic illnesses and will continue to mask for years to come. Exactly. Same. And okay, so this is where it's like, it's so frustrating because when it comes to, obviously we acknowledge that the pandemic is still happening. But in addition to that, even if we turned around tomorrow and said the pandemic was over, there's no longer a risk of contracting the virus. Even if that was true, it's not, but let's say it was. So many people are living with long COVID now. What COVID was a mass disabling event. Like whether we want to acknowledge it that way or not, it's what happened. Anywhere from 10 to 30% of people who contracted COVID, which is a lot of people, now live with long COVID, i.e., long-term symptoms from their time having COVID. And that means that all of those people are now disabled. Which is interesting because we already didn't have access to a lot of support and systems to make existing as a disabled person accessible, and now there are presumably millions of more people who are going to need access to those things either now or later in their life, because they're going to experience more and more of those symptoms. And so this brings up this really interesting conversation regarding community care and why we should be doing community care and like collective liberation versus trying to leave this up to individuals. One of the articles talked about how COVID precautions should be considered an aspect of accessibility, just like any other accessibility thing that you might think of. So maybe that's like providing ASL at an event, providing captions for my stream, providing a sensory safe space for people to take breaks, providing breaks in your, whatever you would think of when you're doing event planning. Or just hosting any kind of a space, then COVID precautions should be considered a part of it. And even beyond COVID, just precautions for immunocompromised and high risk people should be part of that. It should be part of our community care. But a lot of people don't, and therefore they further marginalize our disabled queer community, even from being a part of events that are supposed to center us, as queer people. Because we're disabled, we get left out. The quote says, "I think the reality is that the shift from the collective response to the individual disproportionately burdens people who may be immunocompromised, disabled, or have chronic underlying conditions." Which makes perfect sense because a lot of us already rely a lot on community care before the pandemic and can't really get by fully on our own and suffer under the individualistic focus of the US. And probably beyond the US as well, but that's what I know the most about. So I will say within the US. And so it says things like, it says dropping the mask mandates last winter, many high risk people became exiled in a pandemic limbo, as we talked about before, isolated from society, as even essential businesses such as pharmacies or grocery stores have deserted COVID-19 protections. So we used to have options such as telehealth, food delivery, at home COVID testing, mask mandates, stimulus checks. And, I could argue for at length as to the fact that we still didn't have enough support during the pandemic to get through it, especially as disabled and chronically ill people. But we had some things. We had, grasping at straws, but we had some things to help us. And now that there's this sense of complacency among non-disabled people, this like mass misinformation that the pandemic is over, or that it's not a big deal, or that you'll either get COVID and you'll, like, basically people think about it as only death, right? They think about it as either they don't think COVID's real, I won't get it, it's not a thing, it's like a cold, it's not a big deal, or they think, you know, I'll either get it or I won't, and then they think that people pass away from it. I think a lot of people distance themselves from that element of it, but they don't think about it as a mass disabling event. They don't think about it's not talked about outside of the disability community as something that will leave you with lifelong symptoms and what that will mean for your ability to work, for your ability to function and build relationships and achieve anything that it is that you might want to achieve, So because of that, like, narrative that gets told to us, it's not treated as a community care thing. It's treated as a very individualistic experience, and that's very harmful to the disability community. And something that Cooper brought up in the original TikTok that I had referenced as inspiration, but also just in general, is how this is related to our history in the queer community, when it comes to HIV and AIDS and that crisis that we lived through, and how we're seeing kind of a repeat of history and the dangers of that. And how it's really insensitive that a lot of the queer community doesn't include disability activism and disability justice politics into the work that they're doing. There was something that I was gonna say related to this. Hold on a second. Oh yeah. It says, like, the history of the HIV and AIDS crisis, and the ways in which the disability community, the ways in which the disability community became inextricably linked to the queer community and had to learn to care for high-risk queer people. Like, those lessons should have carried forward with us But instead, like I said, we're seeing history repeat itself and seeing the queer community make the same mistakes, which shows us the dangers of not understanding um, intersectionality and the experience of multi marginalized people. And I haven't even fully had an opportunity in this short time to touch on further complexities for other folks who have different marginalizations that can play a part in it as well, right? Like, I bonked my microphone. I was like, why are the captions not working? But I thought they would just come back around. Thank you, Puffs. Um, I'll just restart that thought from the top just in case. I was basically saying that that I in this PowerPoint haven't even had the full space to talk about what effects it can have if you hold other marginalizations outside of being just queer and disabled, right? And how that affects your unique experience of being queer at the intersection of queerness and disability. That can affect it even further. You know, for example, myself as a white person, I'm going to experience the intersection of queerness and disability different than my BIPOC counterparts, for example. So I think that's also a really interesting and important element to consider um, when we're talking about all of these things. Thank you for letting me know, by the way, that I had bonked me microphone, professional strimmer things, you know. And this says ableism and exclusion are not new in queer spaces. However, the pandemic has highlighted how fast non disabled people in our communities will forget about precautions that benefit us once the majority of people seem not to be at risk of harm. Um, I think that quote speaks for itself. And I think the emphasis on the highlighting how fast it'll happen is really important. I know myself, and I'm sure a lot of you who are queer and disabled, or who are even just maybe not disabled, but still participating in um, safety precautions in the pandemic and experiencing how isolating it can be, and the shame that can come, like if you're like the only person in a space wearing a mask, and how uncomfortable that can feel, isn't an experience that's necessarily unique to disabled community. Just we tend to be the ones wearing the mask for the most part, and therefore we experience it more often. But um, I know I myself have been experiencing like a lot of grief. I don't know if anyone else resonates with that, but a lot of grief around seeing how quickly people who I trusted, people um who work hard to curate safe spaces will drop the precautions around the pandemic. So I'll give an example of TwitchCon again, just because it's an example that's on my mind right now because TwitchCon 2023 was just announced. In that last year, there was advocacy for wearing masks and for COVID precautions, and how I saw people who curate safe spaces online, and who do a good job of that in general, then go to this massive event and not wear their mask in the places that they're supposed to. Um, and I remember feeling a lot of grief in recognizing that that would affect how close I could become to that person who I had trusted. And I felt like that trust was really harmed by seeing that. Um, and I remember feeling very hurt and very left out. And I remember feeling like we weren't really supposed to talk about it because everybody else was finally getting to have fun after 2 years of feeling stuck inside, and that it was a very isolating experience to feel mad at people for not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And that you were spoiling the fun, that you were the negative Nancy if you brought it up. That's a really like nice way to put it, but it hurts to feel disposable, acceptable losses to society. Exactly. And there were literal political figures essentially saying, like, not just with their actions, but with full chest, saying basically that they didn't care if disabled people died. They wanted to get back to capitalism. And that was really hard to see. It was very demoralizing, very dehumanizing, like you said, ebook. So it's been an experience for sure. Yeah. And the last subject that I kind of wanted to touch on before we grab our guests to lean into our panel section of today's stream is intimacy and relationships. But I do realize that I missed something earlier that I had wanted to say. So I am going to go back for a second to this point about long COVID specifically. And then I had read, and a little bit of my research had shown that trans and queer people in general are more likely to get COVID, to get long COVID, which is even more of a reason where it's rough that the queer community isn't uplifting their disabled queer counterparts. And I wanted to share a little bit about why that, what the research showed, why that might be. So it said, in general, we, as in the trans and queer community, have lower rates of being treated as humans. People who are denied access to healthcare, resources, or bodily safety are at a higher risk of ill health outcomes, which includes the mass disabling event known as long COVID. There's nothing inherent about being queer or trans that predisposes people to chronic illness, including long COVID, yet the interlocking network of structural healthcare disparities that queer and trans people face, such as lower access to doctors or stigma regarding their gender or sexuality, can partly explain the higher rates alongside other LGBTQ health disparities faced by the community. So, all the more reason that conferences such as Creating Change should, and any other LGBTQ oriented space should be including accessibility measures such as options to attend online, required testing, required masking, required, hand sanitizer and things like that. All the more reason those things should be included, because the queer community is more impacted by long COVID than cishet folks, and that resources and resource sharing and conversations and skill building spaces are really needed within the queer community to help us uplift our fellow queer people who are going to have to exist with the effects of long COVID. So yeah, sorry to kind of like go backwards, but I thought it was important, and I had missed it in my notes as I was going through. But yeah, and then the last topic that I had found a research on and found very interesting, and you all kind of touched on this, and so did I, but the grief and loss of relationships, who had prioritized getting back to normal over the health of the people in their lives. And I think that's one of the hardest parts, right? Like the loneliness, the the loneliness and the isolation that comes from not being able to connect with others in the same way, especially now that they go forward to pretend as if the pandemic is not happening, and then they have the ability to connect with each other in those ways that we can't really participate in. Because before, when there were more shutdowns and things like that, and more people were staying inside due to the pandemic, it was kind of a collective experience that we were having. Definitely not identical, because even when there were requirements in place, they weren't well maintained. And so a lot of people were still theoretically saying they were being safe, but not really being safe, right? When you looked at their practices. But even more so now, as complacency has replaced um, any efforts at all to, stay safe. Now, other people are going back to their traditional ways of connecting and traditional ways of being intimate with people. And that really leaves a lot of queer disabled people out from trying to make connections, whether that's platonic connections or romantic connections or sexual connections. Um, those are happening back at bars and clubs and even conferences and other more formal means, but we're not included in that. So how do we make those connections? And it's especially hard when a lot of people have experienced things like Zoom fatigue and are very tired from like engaging online, and that's understandable. I experienced that myself as a disabled person, but this is the only tool that I have available to me now. You now are doing other things and you're not utilizing this tool because you're exhausted from um other experience that you've had. But imagine if you're exhausted as a non-disabled person, how exhausting this whole experience is from a disabled perspective. you know if you have the spoon's interest, I would love to read and share a transcript of this talk. I'd love to have this conversation with queer folks in my own community. Oh, of course, Puffs, of course. I don't know if I will be able to get a transcript for you specifically, but the VOD should stay up for a while if you want to point to that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it does. Um, Gotta have a blue do sip. Please hold. Last and final thought before we take a little break and I get our panelists on is related to the idea of friendship, intimacy. I guess this specific bullet leans a little bit more towards like sexual or romantic relationships, but when it comes to intimacy and trying to create those connections, um, if you are someone who believes in the value of harm reduction, risk reduction, of consent, then your interactions with people you're trying to make friends with, people you might be trying to have a romantic or a sexual relationship, should include COVID conversations. If it's not already, it should now. There should be conversations happening about new I want to say neutral conversations where people aren't made to feel bad over what boundaries they're comfortable with. Neutral is complicated, but you know what I'm trying to say. I think like you should be having conversations about whether or not someone feels comfortable being unmasked around you, or if it should be a masked interaction. When was the last time that you were tested? What kind of ventilation is in the area? Can we be outside? Like all of these conversations should be happening during your conversations about wanting to build friendships, wanting to build relationships, the same way that you would discuss, have you been tested for STDs, STIs? Are we going to wear protection? What level of engagement are you comfortable with? What are you consenting to? Um, it should be handled very similarly. And if you're not doing those things, then it's not too late. It's not too late to shift and start having those important conversations around boundaries and needs in relationships. But if you want to include your disabled queer comrades in all of that, then you have to have those conversations. You just do. Otherwise, you always leave it up to us to bring up those conversations, and that can be very draining and very othering and very isolating. So, um, yeah, yes. I think that's it for my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in chat. And here's all my information if you want to follow me on social media, or if you have any questions you might want to email to me. This is my email. Yeah, and we are gonna slide into the portion where I'm gonna go onto a BRB. I'm gonna use studio mode and set up our guests and talk to them. But our guests today are Tiona, or T, who uses they them pronouns. If you would like to follow them, I think we have a shout out command in this channel. Oh, I might not be able to do it though because I'm not technically modded. I'll just put the link because that might be easier if I don't get bonged. No, I don't think so. Okay, good. For both of them, if you'd like to follow them. I don't think the way that it works in this channel, ebug, is like that there is a guest command. So let me just go ahead and oh, I don't know if my links are working, but whoever did the shout out for Tiona, thank you. And if you would like to do the same thing for Lala after the like time passes that Twitch makes you wait, that would be great. Um, I appreciate that. Whoever was able to do that, thank you very much. But yeah, so it's T, or Tiona, who uses they them pronouns, and Lala, who uses she he they pronouns interchangeably. So those are our guests. I'm gonna go get them set up. So if you need to take a break, if you need to stretch, eat, med check, water, all the good things, please do in this moment. Take a check in with yourself, and what you might need, and we will be back in just a few. BRB, besties. BRB. All right. Hello, friends. Welcome back. Thank you for being patient. We were trying to get all the technology to cooperate, but I think I have our friends. If T, you want to try saying something and see if it's picking you up. Okay, hold on. The answer is no. I can hear you, but they cannot. I think I know exactly what happened though, so I think it's an easy fix. Okay, one more time.
Hello.
Yes. Okay, perfect. They should be able to hear you now. Okay, good. Y'all let me know if the volume is good for you all for each speaker. I can turn them up or down as they're speaking, so just let me know. Chat what's the vibe? But I'm gonna have each of them introduce themselves because they are wonderful humans, and I want them to tell you all about who they are before we get into our questions and stuff. We were silenced by the technology was very rude, but we figured it out, I think. So T, go ahead and tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Hello. Hi. My name is Tiana or T. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a queer, chronically ill variety streamer. But admittedly, the only variety we see is Coral Island and Minecraft. Don't come for me. Um, my name is Tiana Rice because I be writing. I am a freelance writer as well and a digital creator. That's me.
Yes, I put them up. Thanks for letting me know. And Lala, go ahead. Oh, hold on, Lala. Sorry. For some reason, you're not being picked up, which makes literally zero sense because you're coming both from the same exact place. Hold on.
Technology silencing us again during our victory
Literally
lap.
again. So rude.
Mm.
Try. I
See,
think they should be able to hear you now. Do you want to give it another try?
yes, okay.
Sorry.
No, that was fine because my first introduction, I'm always like super nervous, so this gives me a fresh start. Hi everybody. I'm Lala. I use she, he, and they pronouns interchangeably, and I use many words to describe the work that I do. But I primarily am a community engaged artist and creative. I am a streamer here on Twitch, but I'm on an unofficial hiatus because I'm also chronically ill, and the flares are flaring. I'm trying to take it easy and chill. But yeah, I'll probably share more about myself as we go through the conversation. So I'll leave it at that for now.
That is the hallmark of the chronically ill creator, right?
Mm-hmm.
The unintended hiatus.
Ugh.
Not
uh,
intended at all, but here it is. So
always, always, always. But we that's yeah, that's its own. Aurora, thank you for the follow, friend. Welcome to the It Gets Better page. Hello, hello. Cool. So I think first, just like because people don't necessarily know you all, it would be rad if we got to hear a little bit from each of you about what terms and labels you feel comfortable with as a queer person and also as a disabled person. Like, for myself, for example, I'll try to kick us off with questions just to give you all like a little time to think each time.
hmm
Um, so I identify as non-binary, as a lesbian, as queer in general, polyamorous, and then when it comes to disability, I am diagnosed with PCOS, also known as polycystic ovarian syndrome. But I also live with undiagnosed chronic pain that I have tried to get answers for a very long time unsuccessfully. Took me forever to actually identify as disabled because I had no like words to explain like what my disabilities were, but over time I just realized that it doesn't really matter, that basically I am impacted by my chronic pain every single day. So here we are. So yeah, those are kind of the labels that I feel most comfortable with. And we'll just kind of round robin each time. So I'll start with you again, T, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, so I am identify with chronically ill, neurodivergent, and disabled. I have way too many disabilities, but the most pressing ones are I have a post viral illness called myalgic encephalomyelitis, otherwise known as chronic fatigue syndrome, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Formerly, I had endometriosis and adenomyosis, but we got this uterus up out of here, and we don't deal with that anymore.
Uterus
For now, I mean, as long as it doesn't decide to come back, which it
Mhm.
could, I'm good for now. But then I also have
manifesting.
we're gonna keep it like stay away from me, foul demon. Don't come back. But I also have fibromyalgia and polyorthostatic tachycardia syndrome, otherwise known as POTS, which just means that I drink a lot of salty things and eat a lot of salty things to keep from passing out.
Mhm.
That's me.
Yeah, so I feel similarly. The list feels like it keeps going. I was saying with one of my roommates, it feels like collecting Pokemon. My list of disabilities. But I also have ME, CFS. I hate saying the full name because I'm so bad at pronouncing things. So thank you, T, for starting.
I got you.
Yeah, I also have ME and fibro. I am also autistic and have ADHD. I identify as having psychiatric diagnoses. And I also use the term MAD, which is a reclaimed political term to self identify as being, like a psychiatric survivor and someone who is diagnosed with psychiatric disabilities. And then, as far as my queerness, I identify as queer, non binary, more specifically. Excuse me, my throat was like getting a little scratchy, but pansexual. And then I also call myself gender abundant. That is a term that I believe I coined. I never saw it anywhere before I started using it, but I'm like, please,
I
other
love that.
people use it if it resonates. I was having a conversation with someone that's like, what is the opposite of agender? And then people were like, oh, gender fluid, gender queer. It's like, no, that's not hitting. And I was like, gender abundant, like, because it's not a lack of, it's like an abundance of. So, and I was like, yeah, that hits. So that's me.
I I also realized I didn't say anything about my queerness. I just said I was queer. Sorry about that. I am I'm about to say this and I'm about to be like, oh, actually, I'm just queer. Queer encompasses the entirety of my gender, my sexuality. My entire existence is queer. That like, because I identify with non-binary just because that's like the big word we got in this language. But like neuro queer words, gender queer words, because my autism and ADHD also impact my views on gender, both for myself and other people. Um, I've been rocking with the term bisexual since I came out. Back when I was like 18. Technically, I'm just queer, but uh, my siblings, so I still rock with bisexuality, even though like it's not. I barely use it. I'm still just calling myself queer, but that flag is still in my room. I don't care. um, but yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Also, T, just letting you know your headphones are yelling at you.
Oh, you're right. Let me put them right back on the charger.
I always do that, so I was just like, oh, I see the blinking, it's happening. Amazing. And I forgot to say also autistic for myself. Once you all said it, I was like, yes, of course, obviously. Um, but yeah,
Obviously, we flock together. So,
yeah, even before you know, it still happens.
yeah.
um, So I guess T, you kind of started touching on it already when you were talking a little bit about how being like autistic affects how you perceive like your queerness, but how do you all feel like your queerness and disability affect each other or overlap in any kind of way? Um, I feel like there's a million ways I could answer this question. So if you only give like one example, but there's other things, that's okay. But I'm particularly drawn to, I remember doing a project in university about how um, chronic pain can really affect like my gender presentation because I'm very limited in
Mm-hmm.
what is physically comfortable to wear versus what I would necessarily feel most confident in or would provide the most gender euphoria or just general comfort, as well as obviously there's a lot of other factors that go into that, like fatness, like money and access to money to be able to buy clothes, to the willingness and ability to kind of like try something new with your money and then potentially not like it, and all these kinds of things. But I think a lot about how people kind of like shit on folks who don't. Oh, sorry, PG-13. I'm not supposed to swear. My apologies.
Nope.
Um,
Sleep.
bleep. That people will like have really negative things to say towards people who are non-binary, who don't do a lot
Mm,
of obvious physical transition, right? And obviously I understand the privileges involved with being able to pass in the world as binary gender, but I also think there's complexities to it when it comes to disability and how that affects the fact that I like can't do those things, or
mhm,
can't do those things without a lot of difficulty. So that's like one way for me that I feel like I see a lot of overlap, and I'm sure there are different ways I could think of, but um, how do you all feel like your queerness and disability overlap or affect one another? This little face.
Do you want to go?
I, I can. You
Okay.
wanna? Okay. um, I was gonna say that for me, it's hard because being autistic, and like I was saying, that I don't really perceive gender for myself or others in
Mm,
a finite way. So it actually took me a while to come to realize that I wasn't cis because I've always struggled with my gender. Like literally, I have diary entries from when I was like a child where I just don't feel like one of the girls. Like, but I want to be one of the girls, but I just don't feel like one of the girls. And I thought it was because I was a tomboy, but that didn't feel right because I still liked feminine things. Like
mm.
even though the patriarchy was trying to get me, it was trying to get me real bad and make me feel ashamed for liking girly things and being preppy and all this stuff. I'm like, no, I love that. I'm such a Barbie girl. I'm such a Bratz doll, but I'm not a girl.
Mm,
But also, Black womanhood is an intrinsic part of myself, and you can never take that away from me. I am still a Black woman, but I am not a cis
mm,
woman.
Mm. Mhm.
And when you add on that fact with chronic illness, it's like I don't even know what passing would look like for me because my gender doesn't have a look.
mm,
Like how I perceive my gender, there's nothing I could wear. There's nothing I could do to my body to make me feel closer to that gender because that my the way I feel about my gender is that no matter what this looks like, I'm still that.
Mm.
And when even when it came to me wanting to try different clothing because like I do like me some mask clothes now, but it's a limit. There's a point where it's too mask for me and then it actually gives me dysphoria because I feel too separated from where I still want to be. Like I said, I'm still a Black woman, and being Black and somebody who is socialized as a woman, you get your womanhood taken from you
Mhm.
mm,
all the time. You get that, it's stripped away from you, and it comes like trying to be super mask feels like I am still taking that away from myself.
mm.
So I can't properly shop for clothes in a way that like would make someone see me as queer. Sorry, kids are in the back.
We
So
love the
mad.
kids. You don't have to apologize for them. They're perfect.
But yeah, so like I can't like I can wear like be soft mask or whatever, but at the end of the day, like also still physically disabled. I'm neurodivergent. I just want clothes that are comfortable. And
Mm.
honestly, that's not going to have any gender tied to it. There's no presentation going to be in it because as long as it does not send me into sensory overload, that's my primary concern. Is it easy to get in and easy to get out?
Mm,
What I look like in it is secondary. But no matter what, like I said, there are people who are going to look at me and they're not going to see whatever they want to see from like as evidence of me being trans. And of course I also operate under I'm very privileged in that I can be afforded not caring how people see me or because there's safety in that. If I were more visibly queer, that safety is gone. So
mm,
it's like a double-edged sword. I can't do more to be more, but I also don't want to if I do less, it's just people still are gonna be thinking that I'm like a cis woman, and it's like I have to just gotta take that on the chin. Just to get, just gotta take that L and keep it moving.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like we definitely have like different experiences, but I've empathized with a lot of that. Because for me, I think being autistic informs like every aspect of my being. Like like even my other disabilities, like having chronic pain is sensory hell, and so I'm very prone to meltdowns and irritability, and I'm constantly like stimming to self-soothe, and then I feel like I have to isolate myself because if I'm like in crowded places or public places or other people that I don't feel safe around stimming, then I have to like, I have to find places that I do feel safe doing that stuff to self-regulate. And and then when it comes to, gender presentation and how I'm being perceived, like I feel like I've accepted to a degree that a lot of people are going to continue to perceive me as a cis woman, even when I do make efforts to not appear like that. But for the most part, I'm never trying to make an effort to be perceived a certain way. I'm just making an effort to ensure that I'm comfortable in my body and what I'm wearing feels like it's accurately reflecting my inside, and what is perceived as and assigned like traditionally feminine does not necessarily mean that's how I'm viewing it or what I'm trying to get across. Um, if I'm even trying to get anything across at all. Like, I don't necessarily dress for others, I'm dressing for me. And then when I do dress for others, that kind of goes back into disability and more specifically psychiatric disabilities. I have agoraphobia, for folks who aren't familiar. That is ultimately like a phobia, anxiety disorder. That for me it manifests as a social anxiety where I'm scared of getting stuck in like awkward, uncomfortable situations, um, conversations with people I just don't want to have, things like that. So one big example is like my biggest fear is being in a lift and a lift driver asking me about my cane and asking me about the clothes I'm wearing, and I'm like, I have to be in this car until I get to my destination. That's like literally going to bubble up inside of me. I'm going to have the biggest panic attack of my life. So sometimes I'm like, even though I'm going to this queer event and I want to give off the certain vibes, I'm like, no, I have to tone it down because I know to get to this destination, there's a risk of me triggering myself. And so there's just so many ways that all of my different identities overlap. And um, I feel like, I don't know, being disabled and being queer is like this perpetual state of like survival and also affirmation. And I want to echo what y'all are saying too about like the privilege of even being able to make that choice, because some people don't. Some
Mm-hmm.
people have to make the choice of if physically and medically transitioning is what's right for them and what's going to keep them alive and make life worth living. That's a risk to their safety, and that's not a choice that I'm necessarily desiring. And in that, I'm afforded, being perceived as a cis woman is definitely safer than being visibly trans and someone clocking you and being like, you're a trans person. um,
Mhm.
so I don't know, I'll kind of wrap my thought up there. Like you said, B, there's just so much to be said around this. But yeah, I feel like safety is just a really big thing that comes up with the overlap of the two.
I mean, I love all of what you all said, but particularly was like intrigued by the way that you talked about the combination of joy that comes from being like holding these identities, but also like
Hmm.
the survival and the struggle of it. And it's a very, it, in both queerness and disability and other marginalizations, it's such a strange position to be in, to hold two so overwhelmingly different emotions and
Hmm.
experiences at the same time. Um, it's that double edged sword kind of thing. But
Hmm.
yeah. Um, cool. Thank you all for sharing. The next thing that I kind of wanted to ask you all about, because we all have sort of this shared experience, is what your experience has been being like a queer and disabled creator on the internet specifically. Because I don't think that's something that every queer and disabled person necessarily has to deal with. So, thinking about, I think a lot about the ways in which we are put under a microscope as
Mm-hmm.
creators, right? Like, especially live creators, there's obviously something a little bit different to be said in the amount of control that you get over how you're perceived, which is still limited, but is more control when you're the one who's like editing something and you can really curate what that video shows, versus live streaming is such an interesting, unique experience in that whatever kind of happens, it just sort of happens in front of whoever is going to be there, because you don't really have any control over um, who's going to be in that space when those moments occur. And so for myself, I think a lot about the ways in which disability affects that. So being autistic and being live on stream and potentially getting sensory overload. That happens to me all the time, depending on if like I play the wrong game, if I have my audios too high in my headphones, maybe something I'm wearing, maybe some kind of the conversations that happen just becomes a little bit overwhelming. Um and like trying to decide how to navigate that in that moment is really challenging, of like knowing the difference between, okay, like this is too much for me today, like we're gonna wrap up here, like I need to go chill, and having the tools and sometimes being able to like work through those challenging moments, and also what is everybody else's perception of me in that moment, because I experience personally, like when I'm overwhelmed, a lot of like disassociation, so then it's like I don't even have like a fully good perception of how I'm perceiving myself in that moment. So then I really have no idea how the audience is perceiving me, and that can be a little bit of a spiral moment that's very like difficult to deal with and a little overwhelming. So those are some of my thoughts. I don't know what y'all's experiences have been being queer and disabled and being specifically creators on the internet and being perceived, but I would love to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
If you don't mind, T, I could go first. I feel like I have like a very quick answer to this. So I've only been like really creating, officially like content, for about a year now, and streaming on Twitch for also about a year, but very inconsistently. Um, and I think the biggest thing for me is just really having to prioritize authenticity and listening to my body and my mind, and like also practicing like understanding my body and my mind's cues, because I can listen to them but then I can go, huh, what are you saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you telling me? Because a lot of the time I can't tell. So I think that's like a lot of what these hiatuses, is that how you say it, plural? A lot of these hiatuses are coming from just me like listening to my body and going, okay. So as a person with ME, um, it's really important that I don't overexert myself because that can affect my long-term health. And I really implore people to like educate themselves on MECFS if you haven't. B, you are doing a really great presentation earlier talking about long COVID. And for folks that are diagnosed with long COVID, if you have long COVID for 6 months, you're automatically like you have the diagnosis of MECFS, because the criteria is exactly like basically you tick off all the boxes of MECFS. Um, and if you don't have long COVID and you don't have MECFS or you don't know, it's still good to educate yourself because there are millions of folks with both diagnoses. But anyway, that being said, yeah, exertion results in what is called PEM, post exertional malaise. And that can take days to recover from, weeks to recover from. For those with more severe cases of ME or severe manifestations of PEM, it can take months. Um, and for those, again, on the more severe spectrum, folks are often bedridden by their disabilities, housebound. They have no choice but to be isolated in their homes. And I feel lucky that I'm someone who is mostly housebound, and I would attribute that to the pandemic as well. I feel like if we weren't still in the pandemic, it would be a little bit less so because I would trust. Um, outside of my house to be safer. But but yeah, so this whole ramble is just to say, like, I really have to um, measure and keep track of and budget my energy and spoons, if folks are familiar with spoon theory, my social battery. I have to really recognize all aspects of my life and how it informs how I'm able to show up as a creator.
Mm.
I shouldn't force myself to do a stream just because I'm scheduled. I'm like, oh, people are expecting it, waiting on me. And then I go, okay, what if they are? Like, my body is depending on me taking care of it, because if I don't take care of my body, then it won't be able to take care of me. So it's just, yeah. And I feel like if you're trying to build a community through Twitch, or you're trying to be a creator that is like community oriented, then you should hope that your community would want you to pour back into yourself and take that time to
Mm.
recover. So yeah, that's my little ramble. I hope that makes sense. I didn't really tap on or touch on being queer, just because I feel like that's been great so far. I haven't experienced the hate raids. I haven't experienced any transphobia or homophobia as it pertains to being a creator, because my community is a bunch of queer folks. So that has been smooth sailing.
Yeah, you touch on such an important thing when it comes to like boundaries and like really knowing who you are and being confident in who you are as a disabled person when it comes to content creation, because like the dominant narrative you'll hear is like very grind culture, like very
Mm,
the expectation is like you have to do more, you have to do more, you have to do more all of the time. And kind of getting barraged with that a lot is like it means that you have to be really firm in your knowing of yourself and your limitations and your values, right? Like you said, like I'm pouring back into myself, and if I'm building the community the way that I want to and with people that I want to have around, then those people should also be happy that I'm taking a break and that I'm taking care of myself. So
yeah,
if anybody's not doing that, then maybe they don't belong in my space to begin with.
exactly. Yeah.
Period. The voice decided to check out on me for a second. For me with this question, I'm gonna cover the queerness first because that can go real quick. I've been on the internet like just as somebody who's been using the internet since I was very young, like early teen. So I've seen the shenanigans that the
He is
internet
well versed in the
brings.
internet shenanigans.
Mm-hmm. So I have a very, it's not like unique, but that experience very much influenced how things were for me because I've been a creator for 3 years now. I've been disabled for 5. Dang. But yeah, so I've had ME since 2018. Maybe 2017, don't know, but at least 2018. I became a creator in 2020 because I needed uh, to be I was homebound and I needed more people.
Hmm.
The pandemic also started, so it was a whole thing. But for queerness, I built up a community of queer and disabled people, and because I always had those people, even if we were not able to get together and do so, like I didn't start doing social activities like for queer events until these past 2 years.
Mm.
But at first, I just had the people that I was meeting, and now I'm somebody that like I exist out of pure spite. I'm a very loving person, but I'm very spiteful. I don't I it's my autism. I have a lot of unbridled rage within me, and I'm also my sense of justice is ridiculous, and it manifests into me being very angry and very combative. When I am also not a person who likes conflict, but I kind of cope with the homophobia and everything by arguing back and being
Mhm.
very firm with my boundaries. So as a creator, like I've had people come out of pocket. Like literally when I did my stream for Xbox, like people were trying to like come in and misgender me and I was so unbothered by it and they were so upset. And I'm just like,
Mhm.
if you call me she her, I'm not gonna answer to you. And you can do it as much as you want because I can't stop you, but I've been called she her for 25 years of my life. You're not hurting me by misgendering me because my gender has nothing to do with you. Like, realistically speaking, nobody on this planet could gender me correctly and I wouldn't care. Also, this is because I'm afforded that privilege, but also, realistically speaking, my gender is my own.
Mm-hmm.
My
Mm.
gender is about me. I don't care how anybody else feels about it. And that was how I began to feel, because like I came into my like non-binary and trans identity after 2020. Was questioning it in 2016 and 2017, like when I actually was like really getting in the mix. And then I went back to thinking I was cis. And then when I got here and I was surrounded by all these people with varying like identities, and I'm just like, that's that makes sense. Like that's me. And so yeah, like like I'm surrounded by people who love me. I'm surrounded by people who support me. And I am afforded the privilege of not caring how people feel about my trans identity or my queer identity. And I like to block. I block people all the time. My block button is my favorite button to use on any social media
Mhm.
platform. I have never felt that feeling where you feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to block them. Nope, block them. You mildly annoy me, you get blocked
My
because my
favorite
peace
is
is
when
what
someone's
matters.
like, "Go block this person." I'm like, "Oh, okay, hold on." No, 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 no.
Mhm.
Oh, I already
Say
had
no
them
more.
blocked. I don't know what
Oh,
for, but they were already blocked.
yeah.
Mhm.
Or like when drama goes down, like, oh, this person's like racist or transphobic, and I go look, I'm like, well, I don't know when I blocked this person, but past Tiana must have known
Already
something.
knew.
Mhm.
Like, I save myself so much anger because I get so angry on the internet.
Yeah.
And I save myself so much energy because with as someone with Emmy, even emotional stuff
Mm,
Mhm.
triggers my PEM. Like stress, I don't do well. I'm literally experiencing PEM right now from taking a walk 3 days ago. I've been in remission for ME for a solid year, and I guess I'm coming out of it because that walk took everything out of me. I don't have the energy. I can't afford to get into arguments with people about my identities. They're not anything you can argue about.
Mhm.
There will never be a conversation about it. But when it came to my chronic illness, unfortunately, I'm still very sensitive about that. I'm not sensitive now, but it took me a very long time to adjust to that as a creator, because my entire life, the only creators I've seen were not disabled,
mm,
visibly or honest about it. You know, I don't know what people's lives are, but like B said, the entire culture surrounding content creation is about grind culture and grinding. And when I first started doing it, I was like feeling so bad because I had all these dreams and ideas of what my content would look like, and none of them came true because they were all based in this idea that I'd magically not be disabled and could do all these
Mhm.
things.
mm.
And I'm so unmasked. I This pandemic has unmasked my autism. Like, I didn't even know I was autistic before this pandemic, but being in this pandemic and being around more autistic people has forced me to look at myself, and I'm like, oh, there was no way you were like, why didn't they see it? Because I reflect on my childhood and I'm like, you were there was a moment where you were very unmasked, and then you but
Mhm.
being a creator now, both most of my community are people who are also disabled or chronically ill and neurodivergent. So there's a lot of space that's always being held for me, which I really appreciate. And once again, I'm very big with my boundaries because I know that if I don't have my boundaries, I'm going to lose myself in this. And that was something I never wanted to do. So there was a time where I pushed myself too far,
Mm.
but I also had a scare because the thing about ME is ME can be very deadly. And there was a point where I very like I think about like I visibly saw death and I was like, we're gonna have to roll this back. I'm actually not ready to go. I'm so not ready for that.
Mm.
So let me rework this. And I started taking more breaks. I started holding more space for myself. I stopped apologizing for it. I used to apologize all the time because I thought that I was disappointing people, but then I just have people who are like, no, you are literally chronically ill. You are literally disabled. We know this. You're allowed to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And now I don't care. I'm like, thank you. Like my people know me. My people know what I need, and I'm going to just take care of myself. And at this point, the kind of content I make is centered around me and my access and my needs. There's no consistency. The only thing consistent about my content is that I'm going to be inconsistent. And that is what you sign up for. And if you don't like it, that's okay. There ain't no beef. Go find someone who will give you what you enjoy. I love that for you. You got it. But me, if that's not me, that's okay. But the people who love this, they will be here, and I will keep it going and doing what I do because I enjoy it. But I'll keep my access needs in mind always.
Mhm.
think it's so interesting, like, you made me think, T, because I remember you saying, like, you started creating content and stuff, like, and getting involved during the pandemic because, like, you needed more community. And I know that that was kind of like my experience as well, as to, like, why I started even getting involved on Twitch, because I needed more queer and disabled friends during the pandemic, during a time that obviously a lot of us cannot leave our house safely, don't feel comfortable. And then I got thrusted into like full time content creation and like what that journey has been like, because it's been hard in the sense of like people really want to be a full time content creator. So they see it, and it is obviously like a very big privilege to be able to do that for work. And then at the same time, it's also very scary and inconsistent. And I wish I had like better options that were more sustainable for my family,
Mm-hmm.
to not constantly wonder, not constantly have to seek mutual aid, like for help and things like that. And so it's like, it's again, I don't know how many times we can come back to this like double edged sword, right? Where it's obviously something I'm very grateful that I even have any semblance of an ability to do, because there are people out there who essentially have to physically work and just destroy their body faster, and, you
Mm-hmm.
know, essentially shorten the longevity of their life because they don't have any choice. Um, and so it's a big privilege in that way, but it's also super scary and inconsistent and affects my mental health a lot surrounding being a creator. The fact that my own health and like my family's like financial stability is reliant on my capacity to create content, and how that plays a part in like navigating taking breaks, right? Like, because for me, it's a lot of times it's not, oh, like my community is going to be upset that I'm gone for a while. Most of the time, it's more like, what effect is this going to have on our ability to like put food on the table, like pay rent, like all these kinds of things that are outside factors. So it's messy. It's not easy. It's not
It
simple by any means.
Mm-hmm.
that reminds me, because like for me, my experience with content creation is also because I'm on disability now. I fought for a very long time to get it, and I lost my. I cannot work.
Mm-hmm.
Like as long as my body is like this, and from what my doctor and the research is telling me, this is forever now. I will never be able to maintain a 9 to 5. It's not. It was never accessible, but it's impossible now. And before I actually started doing content creation, before I got my disability, but I started considering, like, so for me, I started out as a writer, and I always wanted to do freelance because I felt like that was the only thing I could do. And because like I was seeing it, I remember I was working a call center job, I was working from home, and I was like slumped over this very desk, but in a different corner of my house. Like I was falling asleep, I couldn't concentrate, brain fog was just like, and I was so stressed. I was like crying all the time. Like, I don't know how I can do this. Like, I gotta pay rent. I have a sick pet. I am sick. How am I supposed to do all this? I'm getting nothing from food stamps, and I'm expected to put, like, when I first moved out and before I even touched content creation, I was getting $21 in food stamps. I was working part-time at a food service place, and I was getting like kind of help with my rent. I was so behind on bills. I did not enjoy the first year of living alone. And I was thinking about becoming a content creator because like I need to do something home. Like I was freelancing, doing transcription jobs and occasional writing jobs, but I started venturing into Twitch and everything because one, I had a very misconstrued idea of what being a Twitch content creator was like, because everybody's making
As
it
do
seem
many
like
people.
Yeah.
they're making it
There's a
seem
lot
like
of
we're making bank.
misinformation.
No, I make very little from Twitch. Realistically speaking, the bulk of my content creation is not this. So that's another reason why I can afford to take breaks from streaming, because that doesn't mean I'm not working. It just
Mm,
means this aspect of my work I'm not doing because I'm in bed working, because there's never any true rest because bills have to get paid. Even on disability, disability does not cover
no,
it. My disability covers my rent barely, and that's it. And it used to cover more until my rent rose up $300, and now I can't take long breaks. I have to work constantly because that is the only way I'm going to not sink into further debt or get evicted, because even if rent is paid, I still have to eat. I still have to pay all these other bills, because unfortunately, being alive, this means that rent is not the only bill that's due to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I often have to make the choice of, okay, but if I stream, can I do the work that I need to do to survive? Because at
Mm,
the end of the day, streaming is more for fun than it is for finances. Because I can choose not to stream. I can't choose to stop writing. I can't choose to stop doing other content related jobs, because I could lose my disability. My disability recertification happens in another year. And they might look at me and decide, actually, you're no longer disabled in our eyes. And I'm back to square one. And so it's just like a constant tumult, like cloud. That's like you can't leave that once you
Mm-hmm.
enter into being disabled. And as lovely as it is being surrounded by other disabled people, it is very hard always needing help.
mm. And
Like,
always needing help and always usually like circulating the same $20, right? That's what I always like to say.
Right.
Like
yep,
Yeah.
it's always it's not always is dramatic, but a lot of times it's us like holding each other afloat within the disability
Right.
community because
yep,
people don't understand people outside of the disability community don't understand the financial struggles of existing as a disabled human and the ways in
Mm-hmm.
which it's a constant like neither here nor there, can't win, right? If you have disability, you're limited in how much you're allowed to work, so then it's like how do I get enough money to exist? If you don't have disability, then you don't have any support system of like financial backing, and I don't know, not to go on a whole other tangent, but it's very complicated to exist under capitalism as a disabled human. And
It is. And the systems, it's like it's so blatant how these systems like purposefully keep us in
mm,
this like oh, what is it called? I can't think of the word. They're just like poverty policies.
mhm,
All of these policies, it's like, oh well, you make too much money to qualify for this benefit, so you have to work less. Oh, you're not working enough to get this benefit, or like, I don't know. And then for, as sorry, brain fog. But in regards to disability, I've just been so like disheartened by applying like 4 different times and or applying and then appealing 3 different times, that I'm just like, okay, I'm not disabled in their eyes because I don't have an official ME diagnosis, because every doctor I see about ME is like, oh well, you've had psychiatric diagnoses since you were 11. This sounds like a result of that stress. It sounds like your body is just stressed out. Mind you, ME is a result of like post infection, like it's a post infectious disease. And I've had the flu 3 times as a kid, and I had mono, and I always got sick, and my immune system has been crap. And I check off all the boxes, and they're like, no, it's because of your psychiatric disabilities. And then my psychiatric disabilities aren't enough for me to be considered disabled, despite those being just as, if not more, disabling than ME
mm,
sometimes. So it's just really frustrating that the systems get to define for us what our disability looks like.
mhm,
Um, and these professionals who don't see the entirety of who we are and don't give us the opportunity to express that. And I hear you, Tiona. And also you be like you speaking to how like this is for you. Um, your income and opportunity to support yourself, and then T, you're saying like you don't necessarily use Twitch for that. And I'm like in a limbo of both, where I'm like, okay, I'd rather have more solid gigs because Twitch is so up in the air for me,
mhm,
because I haven't been able to garner a platform that I can make a substantial amount of money from. I work like 40 hours on Twitch and I make like 50 bucks.
mm,
Like that's not worth it. But then these gigs that I'm working means taking time away from Twitch, despite my passion and my interests leaning more towards Twitch, but my survival leaning more towards these
mm,
other gigs. And so like yeah, just being someone who's disabled and impacted by all of these systems, it sucks how little autonomy or agency that we have in our careers, because it's like if we do lean into what we desire and where our passions are, then we're risking our basic necessities. And by
mm,
leaning towards our basic necessities, we're leaning out of our joy and what brings us pleasure and what makes life worth living. And then sometimes it's like you're fighting for one or both and you're getting neither. It's like, what the hell is excuse me, like what is going on? um and so yeah, just that goes back into the survival. And I guess on a more positive note, from all of this, just being a queer and disabled creator, community has been the thing that keeps me going.
Mm,
Whether it's
yeah.
mutual aid, whether it's people like checking in my DMs, whether it's like movie nights on Discord, whether it's like other streamers being able to like sit in their chat and lurk or engage in the conversation. Just being a part of community makes everything else worth it. And like is really what keeps me going. So, and I'm sure y'all relate.
Yeah, no. I mean, thinking back to our conversation about taking breaks, right? And there's like these really special moments sometimes within community where people are like, "No, like please do eat on stream because it reminds me that I need to eat." Or like when you take a break, it reminds me that it's okay if I take a break, and like really trying to like help each other in that way. Hi, Biscuit.
I know, it's like the baby.
He said, I want to be the star of this show, please. Thank you. I remember when you were just a little puppy. Now you're
I
so
know, he's
big.
so big.
He seems to have calmed down a little bit, though. I feel like he was more chaotic there when he was like first getting bigger.
Oh, he's less chaotic. Still chaotic, but less chaotic.
Just tone down the tiniest bit, yeah.
We'll trim.
We'll take what we can get, honestly. Um, Obviously, we had like so many more questions, but we only have like 10 minutes left. But it's okay.
Yeah.
I've really loved our conversation, and I would rather like get into it than shorten it to try to cover like a lot of different things. But I did talk a lot in my presentation. I think it is important to touch on maybe with our last 10 minutes a little bit about, I guess, the experience of being queer and disabled people in the pandemic, and like what that has specifically, how that has specifically affected us, because I think it's a little bit different than if that hadn't happened and we were having this same conversation. Um, Especially right now, like I was saying in my presentation, there was this quote of like this idea of a pandemic limbo that a lot of disabled people are living in, where we feel like we're still living in the pandemic, but the rest of the world has really moved on and there's no longer any resources available. Nothing feels safe, but also we're expected to move forward with life, move forward with our careers, move forward with relationships, and all these kinds of things, and like how difficult that has been. Um, and like how I guess like you think that you should be able to find support and community with other marginalized people, such as your queer community, but then we see that a lot of the queer community doesn't really engage with disability justice politic in the way that they go forward with things, and like how hurtful that can be to see, and how hard it is to like, I guess, connect with non disabled queer people, if that makes sense. So I don't know what y'all's experience has been. That wasn't really a question so much as a ramble, but hopefully it can spark a thought and we can go from there.
I can definitely speak to this because I feel very disheartened.
Mm.
I feel gaslit so bad. It's hard because, on one hand, the pandemic has brought me a lot of community. But on the other hand, I lost any hope of being in the overarching queer community. The
Mm-hmm.
like going to queer events and queer places and stuff and being more involved, that's dead. Because I on one hand, I've been witnessing since the beginning of the pandemic people saying that my life was not worth doing the bare minimum of protecting because I am not obligated to be protected. For some reason that is such a wild concept to me, that other human beings don't have to protect you. What I can't wrap my head around that. And then seeing people like in like a lot of my identities like basically slap me in the face, like the communities associated with them, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, no matter what, like whether it be the black community, the queer community, even the overarching disabled community will turn their backs on the vulnerable if it means they can go do other things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think that I there will ever be a moment where that hurt goes away
Mm-mm.
because like you said, I'm in a pandemic limbo. I live in Florida. Florida's moved on. You wouldn't know there's a pandemic here. I don't see anybody wearing masks when I go out, but I definitely see people staring me down when I'm wearing mine.
Yeah.
And I have to constantly choose like I it's so frustrating because I hate witnessing people who act as if they are the only ones who want to live and do things.
Mm.
Right.
I spent 3 years homebound. And right when I got the energy, and we thought things were getting better, it got worse, but everybody else moved on. And as much as I would love to go out and do all the things that I wish I could have done in my early 20s when I was first getting hit with my disability stuff, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably will never be able to because I can't afford to get COVID. It will kill me. And all of the resources that we should have, we don't. And that's so very frustrating to witness. Like the infrastructure is gone or didn't exist and nobody cares. And I will never be able to meet a new person without asking them how they've been moving and what they feel about any
Mm-hmm.
of this because
Mm.
that will determine how you move when it comes to stuff that's important to me.
Yeah. And it's really hard to watch people that you thought you could trust then act in ways that identify that you actually can't.
Mhm.
People who claim to share your politic, but then the actions just don't line up, right? To and it's easy to say this, that, and the other, but it's it's actual work to engage in have your actions line up with what you say that you believe in. And I think there's
Mhm.
a lot less people out there who want to do the actual work,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. I appreciate everything you shared, T, because I think I don't know. I think most conversations that I am a part of and witness around the pandemic, people always try to add a sense of like hopefulness to it. And I appreciate that intention, but also like I have a lot of rage around this, and I appreciate you like just naming a
Mm-hmm.
lot of yours, like your frustrations. Um, and I've definitely been experiencing a pandemic limbo since I first heard the word COVID. I was like, what is going on? Trying to educate myself. Most of my initial introduction to COVID was around the topic of anti Asian racism and xenophobia, which is racism against Chinese folks. And then that started like moving into more awareness around the pandemic, mandates that obviously did not last, and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and people participating in mutual aid, which was fleeting, and things like that. So just like every single time it felt like there was some hope or something was going to change or awareness was being raised and people were engaging in these conversations, it was virtue signaling, it was performative, it was because it was like trendy for folks, they felt like they were a part of whatever was the hot topic and whatever was relevant, but it feels no longer relevant to folks, so these conversations aren't being had anymore, these efforts towards like community care aren't happening anymore unless you are like of these vulnerable populations. And I think unless you are like multi marginalized, it's it's very likely that you are a person that is discrediting this work and not participating in this work. And for folks who follow me on Instagram and watch my stories, and especially those of my close friends' story, see how like just angry I am at all times about all of this, because it's just like I can't accept this. I can't accept a 3-year pandemic and those who I wanted to build friendships with won't even wear a mask. They'll post all these group photos. They'll post themselves on cruises. I'm literally gonna name drop, but there's this community organization, Sapphic Nights, and they've been known to um, to have events with zero COVID protocols, people getting COVID, persisting to have zero COVID protocols, having cruises where it's packed, everyone's taking pictures, dancing on each other, kissing strangers. And, you know, pre pandemic, I would mind my business. I would have the tiniest bit of like, I don't know, I have my own personal politic of like kind of a lot of what you were saying be during your presentation of like harm reduction and consent and making sure that people feel comfortable with the actions that you're choosing. Because I think, I don't know, I'm rambling a lot. This is my ADHD coming in. I'm like, have so many branches. I'm like trying to
You're
tie.
so fine. I love listening to both of you ramble. I think it's very I don't expect perfect concise thoughts. It's all good.
Yeah, thank you. But anyways, I think my point through all of this is like the pandemic through has been 3 years long and has shown us so much. We've learned so much from it. And there are those who are like shunning and turning away from the knowledge and turning away from these wisdoms and these bare minimum things that they can participate in, such as wearing a mask, such as like if you're hosting an event, detailing in your flyer, in your caption of your posting of it, what accessibility efforts like you're doing to host this event, and actually having conversations with disabled folks. That specific organization I name dropped, I've tried to engage with them, and so many of my disabled local friends have tried to engage with them, and they're like, well, we feel isolated, do you want us to just not like have these events? And we're like, you are further isolating those that literally know for a fact that they will die or become more disabled, if they attend these events, and also you're risking disabling and killing the folks that aren't already disabled that are attending your events.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all are just ignoring that fact. And the one other thing I'll add is something I've been talking about a lot in general and have mentioned a bit on this panel is long COVID results in ME. ME is a diagnosis that there is no cure for, and the only treatment is pacing, resting, and rest is oftentimes not what is it? I can't think of the word, but rest doesn't help anything, honestly. It's just preventative more than it is restorative. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And so I'm I don't like the idea of the only reason people caring is because they're scared to become disabled, but I honestly wish that they were a little scared because
A
this
little
is
more
scary.
aware.
Right. Like
Yeah.
I'm scared living through this every day, and these people are like, well, everybody's going to catch COVID. Like if I do, then whatever. Or if they're like, I won't catch COVID, like I'm safe. I only go around healthy people. Like what? I just have a big question mark of like what
How
do
do you
y'all
know?
actually what do y'all actually think? You just have like a force field
There's a lot
because
of
you're
cognitive dissonance happening,
Yeah.
you
exactly.
know.
And so that's where all my frustration stems from is just the individualism, the replication of systems that people are claiming to resist and wanting to abolish. I'm like, I have or have had friends who are like, I'm an abolitionist, abolish prisons, but they don't want to abolish eugenics. They participate in eugenics, but they don't like the word and they don't like the accountability. Um, and that just sucks, but I'm very glad to be in community with people who are aware of this and want to continue to spread awareness and bring in people and be like it's not too late to participate and care.
It is never too late. Thank you
Never
for
too
saying
late.
that. I think that's probably the most important thing that I want to like wrap up with because we do have to hop off. I don't know if there's anyone after us on the channel, so I don't want to take over too much time, but
Mhm.
if you got caught up in the narrative that's being spread that the pandemic is over, um and got caught up in feeling comfortable and wanting, all the things that we all want to, it's I'm not going to say it's okay. You need to reckon with like the harm that caused during the time that you did it, but it doesn't make it too late to change your actions.
Mhm.
Right.
It's never too late to decide you are going to be in community with your disabled peers. It's never too late to put your mask back on. And now that you've learned better, we all only know what we know in the moment, and there is a lot of misinformation being spread. And so the fact that you may have thought differently is, not great, but understandable. But now that you know better, do better.
Mm-hmm.
and actively so, and not just in like the way that you say that you know words only mean so much kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, cool. Thank you both for being here. Can we um get another shout out for I don't know if the can you maybe one of the mods can try the exclamation point shout out, see if I know there's a timer limit on the Twitch one for whatever reason. That's kind of a pain. Also, hi Nick. It's good to see you. Thank you all for being here. Those of you who are hanging out in chat. It does feel nice to like feel heard and listened to about these types of things.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Let me also figure out where we can go to raid, but I will pop back over to the single camera stream. So T and Lala, you all are more than welcome to go rest and do what you need to with the rest of your day. But thank you for being here and joining me on the panel. And I
Thank
hope
you
you
for
both have
having
a
us.
good
Yeah,
rest of your
thank you.
Sunday. Bye, besties.
Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for being here, friends. I'm gonna find someone for us to raid. We do typically go to raid someone else who's part of the It Gets Better team. So just gonna see if anybody's online that we can spread the love to. Do 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 do. Oh, thank you for being here. It's always like a little intimidating to stream on someone else's channel. So even though I've been doing this for like a minute now, it's still intimidating to me personally. So every time people show up and they say hello and they just share space with me, it means a lot. So okay, I think let me see if I'm able to do this. I don't think I can because I'm not a mod. Let me see if one of our mods um oh, it did work. Okay, cool. Here is the It Gets Better raid command that you should be able to copy because those are universal emotes. And I'm gonna get us started on the little raid. We're gonna go raid Wreck-It Raven, who also uses they them pronouns and is playing Final Fantasy today. And is just a wonderful human and streamer. So if you want to come along with us, put a smile on their face, hopefully. Yeah, if you want to follow me over on my channel, it's twitch.tv/queerlybee. I stream 3 to 4 times a week over there and hold conversations like these, but also just like fun, cozy, safe, coexisting spaces while we play like games and share in our special interest in hyperfixation. So, yeah, that's all for today, friends. Thank you for being here. Feel free to grab that raid message, and I will see you all over in a few minutes in Raven's channel. All right, awesome. Bye, everybody.